Wednesday. Hold that light. The sun is starting to beat down on the back of my neck. So I just want to summarize that guy, Nayana Paniga. Aaron said it better than I did. He's basically talking about the difference between the direct experience of something and somebody's description of what something is. And I think it's important to mention as well that while Buddhism doesn't believe in a creator God, in the sense that they have a really hard time with God in the workshop, they're agnostic about God in other places. So they're willing to say that people have experiences that they identify as God. And that for them is a different question from whether, well, for them the universe has always been and always will be, and so there is no creation point. And so it's not helpful to try and talk about a creator because to them there isn't a point at which things were created. Everything for them is cyclical. And so that in a long and verbose sort of way is what he was trying to get at there. And that truth that when we have experience and the experience doesn't match what the official describers, to use a Bushism, say our experience ought to be, there's always conflict. And the best, there's two analogies that I can think of. One is that, you know, you could read somebody's description of a sunrise or a sunset. And then maybe you go out and, look, it's Quasimodo. And you go out and you experience a sunrise or a sunset. And you describe it in a way that it appeared to you. Whoever wrote that description, if your experience is different, if they're really attached to their description, the official explanation, well, they're not going to like yours. And this is where conflict starts. And I sort of had an experience of that last night at this wedding reception we were at, when I went to stand outside for a little bit because it was a family-style seating kind of thing. And one of the women at the table had a minimum words per day quota that she apparently had to meet. And, you know, it was probably about 30,000 words a day that she had to speak, and she was behind, so it was like, ah. So I said, I'm going to go outside. And I went outside, and this guy came up to me and asked me if he could talk to me, and started to tell me that he was afraid of dying. And he said he was about 30 years old, he had 2 kids, 8 and 9, I think he said. And sometimes at night he started to wonder about what happens. And he told me that he didn't like churches very much, or religion very much. And I said, well, you know, join the club. And but that he always felt peaceful when he went into one. And then he was quick to say, not, you know, that I've done terrible things. And I said, no, I understand what you mean. There's places that are peaceful. But he said he was really worried about what happens. And as his kids get older, he worried about it more. And what he was most concerned about, it seemed to me, was everything going to be okay? Not so much the dying part, although there was some of that, but what happens next. And I decided just to be honest, and I said, well, you know, truthfully, we don't know, because nobody's ever come back to tell us. And he was quick to tell me that Jesus came back, but then he was quick to admit that that probably wasn't the average experience. And he was coming from a place where he had received those descriptions. You know, the official description of the sunset, the official description of what happens after you die, the official description of what makes you a good person or a bad person, the official description of God as judge. And while he felt he hadn't done anything really terrible, he knew he wasn't perfect. And he's been in this relationship with this woman who's the mother of his children since they've been in high school. So if he's 30, I don't know. Even if he was on the 6-year plan, it's been at least 10 years. And really worried about what did that mean. Did God stick to the rules that the people had written that would say that because he wasn't married, that was wrong, because they had children and they weren't married, that was wrong, because he didn't go to church regularly, that was wrong. And I just tried to bring him back to his experience. And his experience of how he felt about his children. And, would he ever do anything to his children that would cause them to suffer? And he said, of course not. And I said, well then, is it reasonable to believe that God would? And we were able to come to a place where he decided that it would be okay if he trusted his heart. And if he did what he thought was the right thing, that was good enough for God, even though it wouldn't be perfect. And that if he did that, he could trust that whatever happens in the end, even though we don't know what it is, that would be okay too, that God would take care of that. Now that's a very different image, an image that a lot of people would say was heretical, because it doesn't fit the description. Which brings us up against this whole thing about Jesus being God. And this is one of those passages that pushes the question. Jesus basically says, I am not God. And the official description writers, being less than content with sitting with that uncertainty, just have craft reasons for him saying that. Well, he was being humble. Well, he didn't want people to find out who he was. Well, yada, yada, yada. But there still is this point where if somebody comes up to you and says, is your name blah, blah, most people are going to answer yes. And so I think we have to sit with this in a different sort of way. First of all, understanding that like the Buddhists do, there's this issue of creator God and then the experience of God. And there's other issues around God. God's not like a point that we have to find. There's divinity, there's a whole lot that goes into it. But for many that would be heretical. What does it mean if Jesus isn't God in the way that's been described to us? Or what makes Jesus God? Now, the Jewish religious mind tracks being Jewish through the mother. Your mother being Jewish gives you your Jewishness. And so the fact that Jesus was born of a Jewish woman, to the Jewish mind, made him Jewish. The fact that his father was God opened up the possibility that he was God. But does it matter? It matters if you like ideology. It matters if you like to just grab on to official rules because they give you comfort. And it doesn't matter if things quite fit, you'll just ignore those parts. I once bought a pair of like yellowish sunglasses when I did a lot of driving. And so they weren't, the normal sunglass color. And they were great for kind of dreary, overcast days because it did make everything look a little brighter when you drove down the road. But then I started to realize that I would see like a white car would go by and I would think it was yellow. And that, because I would, or I couldn't find my car because I parked somewhere and I was sure I was parked next to the yellow car that I looked at before I took, And so these glasses both showed me something, it took away the overcast thing and let me see the road a little better, but it also concealed some stuff, like the true colors of things that were around me. And maybe that's what calling Jesus God does. Maybe it reveals some things about Jesus that clearly, as Diana Panika said, he had these mystical experiences of God drawing close. And people who spent time with him and around him had those mystical experiences through him of God drawing close. And so there was something about him that was unique and special and divine. And yet it wasn't like, not that they had birth certificates, but if they had birth certificates, if you'd have looked at Jesus and the Father slot, it would have said Yahweh, Creator, God of, you know. So we need to, I think when we run into that stuff, hold on to what helps us. Recognize that it does open up some sort of truth. But recognize that it also might make the car that we park next to look yellow instead of white. That if we hold it too tight, if we get into that really anxious place where you have to hold the rules, why do you believe that? Because that's what I'm told to believe. You know, pastor said so, father said so, the Bible said so. Yeah. But who are you going to trust? If you go out and experience the sunrise, and it doesn't match the official description of the sunrise, not too many of us would walk away and go, I don't know what that was, but it couldn't have been a sunrise. Because we saw the sun come up. So in the end, like that father who's worried about death and his children, we have to come back and trust our hearts when we're confronted with titles and rules, no matter what it is. And be able to look at it and hold it and say, this part makes sense to me, this part I'm not so sure about right now, and that's fine. And 5 years from now, I might look at the same things and feel completely different about it. And that's fine too, because in between there's all these experiences, and all of those experiences are experiences of God as well, if you believe that God is in everything. If you believe that the universe is just shot through and through full of God, then it all informs this picture. And what doesn't help are definitions that try and narrow things down. What doesn't help are definitions that try and take us out of our heart and our experience. What we need are definitions that allow us to trust that stuff. And to help us to figure out if we've drifted way out into left field somewhere. You know, if we're mixing up the Kool-Aid in the back room, it's probably a good time to read some rules and say, okay, this isn't good. But short of that, if we can just be free to experience things and trust ourselves, I think a lot of the anxiety goes away, a lot of the worry goes away. We won't have to, quite as often, sit up at night wondering what's going to happen if. We might get to the place where we realize that whatever happens is the point of it.